Greetings everyone. In the last video that we did, where we're advising holders of the Zimbabwe exemption permits to apply for other visas, there are some individuals who think that we are wrong, that also think that they are going to be refunded monies that they paid applying for a waiver. But let's briefly get into the court case of the Helen Suzman Foundation. Because the Helen Suzman Foundation did not challenge the decision to terminate ZEP. We need to be very clear on this. It challenged the process because the decision to terminate caught ZEP holders by surprise. Remember that in 2010, the announcement was made around August for people to start the application process 1st of October. It was the same in 2014, again for the people to start applying on the 1st of October of 2014. It was the same in 2017. But in 2021, when people were waiting for the decision, early 2021, on what was going to happen to ZEP holders, the government only announced on the 25th of November, just about a month or so before the expiry of the ZEP. So people were taken by surprise. So the Helen Suzman Foundation, therefore, challenged the process that there was not enough consultation with respect to holders of ZEP. In 2010, we had numerous meetings with the then Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, where she met with a number of stakeholders before she made an announcement that they were granting documentation Zimbabwe project. There were many consultations, again with the civil society in 2014, when the DZP was ended and the ZSP was introduced. Because at that time, what we're asking the then Minister, Honorable Malusi Gaba, was why close down the DZP and then opening ZSP for another 3 years. Because at the time, we have the view that if a person is on a permit for 5 years, then thereafter they qualify for a permanent residence permit, to apply for a permanent residence permit. It was also the issues that were raising in 2010 with the then Minister, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. So the Helen Suzman Foundation says, which we agree with them, that there was no sufficient consultation with those who are holders of the Zimbabwe exemption permit. So we must therefore be clear that the court process cannot stop, as we were explaining yesterday in the other video. The court cannot stop the granting of any permit or visa to holders of the Zimbabwe exemption permits. It cannot. This is why I emphasized that the holders of Zimbabwe exemption permits, they do not care what name the permit is given. What they want is to be documented. So you cannot stop the migration of ZEP, as my brother, Comrade Runyararo in our Telegram chat group puts it accurately, that the migration, the court cannot stop the migration from ZEP to other visas. And he puts it correctly again and says, application for waivers to migrate to other visas cannot be stopped. I want to draw your attention to the waivers that were granted in 2016 to students, migrant students, who are studying or are studying what is called the critical skills subjects, right? In 2016, the Department of Home Affairs granted them waivers to say if your course or your degree that you are studying is considered to be scarce in South Africa, or your profession, once you graduate, your profession is under critical skills. So waivers were then granted to such students to say automatically from your study visa, you apply for a permanent residence permit. That was the waiver. So they waived all these requirements to say, firstly, apply for a work visa, thereafter you apply for a permanent residence. It said straight from your study visa to a permanent residence. Because at the time, government wanted to protect the skills of the migrants that it has trained in its universities, so that they are not recruited by New Zealand, Australia, and other other countries. It was a waiver. But of course, we then know that later such a waiver was withdrawn. Right? So, because there are other people who think that a waiver is only granted to Zimbabwean exemption permit holders. No. There are many people outside the special permit regime who are granted waivers. Like I'm making an example of the 2016 waivers that were granted to students. So a waiver is not only granted to Zimbabwean holders of ZEP. So we need to be clear that the court process cannot stop the migration from ZEP to other visas. The court process cannot stop the application for waivers to migrate to other visas. That's not what was before the courts. What was before the courts, North Gauteng High Court, was that the process to end was unconstitutional in that there was no sufficient consultation with the holders of ZEP. It did not challenge the decision of cabinet to terminate ZEP. Because Helen Suzman Foundation says, if you want to terminate ZEP, fine, terminate ZEP. We have no problem with that. But the problem that you have is, did you consult the holders of ZEP and understood what impact this is going to have on them and their families? That's the only thing that has been before the courts. So this is why we are saying you need, let me put it correctly. Those that wish to apply for waivers, please do apply, because the application is not a forced matter. Those who want to not to apply is their right. Like others have gone back to Zimbabwe. There are some that have gone overseas who said no, will not apply. There are others who are saying after the grace period they want to go back to Zimbabwe. They are busy registering with the embassy because they do not want to pay duty for their vehicles and other goods. Right? Is their right. Again, this morning, I was talking to a comrade of mine who is about 62 years old. He's on ZEP. So he was saying to me, Comrade Maben, in your previous video, what did you mean? I said, comrade, you are 62. You are just approaching your retirement age, right? My comrade is 62 years old. His entire family is in Zimbabwe, right? I know him, his wife, the kids, grown-up kids, they are in Zimbabwe. He's alone in South Africa, he's on ZEP, right? So he cannot argue and say, if you terminate ZEP, my children who are in South Africa, because it does not have children in South Africa who are school going. Different from a parent, say, who's 41 years old, who have young kids that are school going. This is why in the previous video I said it becomes the minister ought to assess each individual based on their own circumstances, not a blanket assessment, but based on an individual's circumstances. So my 62-year-old comrade is about to retire. And I know that he wants to retire and go back to Zimbabwe, right? So if he writes to the minister and says, I'm 62-year-old, in 3 years' time I'll be retired. So what this comrade of mine wants is that when he retires, he gets his full benefits to retire back in Zimbabwe. But it is different from a 42-year-old, a ZEP holder, who has a young family, whose children are still studying here in South Africa. It is different. So I said in the previous video that when the minister receives this presentation from a 62-year-old, the minister will ask, what is your company saying about taking an early retirement, so that in the next 12 months, you process all your benefits and they get paid to you and you take an early retirement because you're already 62. Or the minister might say, okay, instead of I asking you to take an early retirement, I will grant you a visa for 3 years so that when you reach 65, which is your retirement age, you then collect all your benefits and you go back to Zimbabwe. It is possible. So this is why I'm saying, and we have been saying, those that want to move to other visas should do so. Apply for waivers and apply for visas, because the court case does not stop the process of migrating from ZEP to other visas. The court case does not stop the process of applying for waivers to migrate to other visas. A person who has been on ZEP, by the way, who has been granted, since the announcement, who has been granted another visa, it's already on another visa. It does not care what the court says, because they are now on another visa. As we said in this channel, that in 2014, we assisted a number of people who moved from 2014. Once they acquired the ZSP, they to go to Zimbabwe, Harare, at the South African embassy to apply to move to other visas, right? The only problem that we had at that time was that if you apply for a visa while in Harare, the South African embassy will hold your passport until the entire application process is done. So we're to negotiate then that if a person is a holder of the Zimbabwe special permit, once they submit their application for a critical skills visa in Harare, you give them back their passport. So I know quite a number of such individuals that went to Harare, they applied for critical skills visa, there was Zimbabwe special permit, ZSP. They were contacted that the outcome is out, they to go back to Harare to have the critical skills visa into their passports, right? When the ZSP expired, they did not apply for ZEP because they had already moved from the special permits to critical skills visa. And some of them now, they are applying for permanent residence permits. They started with the DZP in 2010. They applied for ZSP in 2014. But because they acquired the qualifications which qualifies them to apply for critical skills visa, they then abandoned the ZSP applied for critical skills visa. When in 2017 the ZEP was introduced, they were no longer part of the ZEP program. We need to understand that. So a person who then moves to another work visa, whether general work visa, critical skills visa, let's assume the minister then says, okay, I'm now closing down the ZEP as I said, but I'm creating another Zimbabwe special permit for another 3 years or 4 years. Such individuals that would have moved will not bother to apply for another special permit, which will have the same conditions as the current ZEP, as was the case with the ZSP, as was the case with the DZP. Angazi abanye benu lithi lina lizaphiwa imali zenu zama-waiver. Esikuchoyo thina sithi inkantolo enkulu ePitoli kayizange icho ukuthi umphathintambo wezangaphakathi kwele South Africa akalalungelo ukuthi amise iZimbabwe exemption permit. Kodwa inkantolo enkulu yakuchoyo okwakucelwe iHelen Suzman Foundation eyayikufaka enkantolo yikuthi umphathintambo wezangaphakathi kwele South Africa akazange axoxisane labantu abaphethe ama-ZEP ukuthi nxa engasaqhubeka ama-ZEP kuzayenziwani. Yikho inkantolo yathi abantu kumele baphiwe inyanga ezili-12 ukuthi uminister axoxisane labo ukuthi ukungaqhubeki kwakhe lama-ZEP kuzabaphatha njani bona lemuli zabo. Inkantolo kayizange icho ukuthi umphathintambo wezangaphakathi akalalo ilungelo elokuthi amise lolu hlelo lwama-ZEP. Inkantolo yathi umphathintambo wezangaphakathi kazange axoxisane labantu. Lokho kwenza isinqumo sakhe asithathayo singabi semthethweni, njalo sifaka abantwana esigabeni esinzima ngoba abantu abaphethe ama-ZEP balabantwana abafundayo. Yikho inkantolo yakuchoyo. Inkantolo ithi nxa umphathintambo wezangaphakathi efuna ukumisa lolu hlelo lwama-ZEP kumele axoxisane labantu abaphethe ama-ZEP, lezi nhlangano ezingasozombusazwe ngalwasemzini othiwa yi-civil society, ukuthi kukhulunyiswane ukuthi ukungaqhubeki ngalolu hlelo kutshoni. Kodwa inkantolo kayichongo ukuthi abantu bengasuki ku-ZEP bangene kwezinye incwadi ezokwenza ukuthi bahlale bese South Africa emthethweni. Njalo inkantolo kayichongo ukuthi abantu bengafaki izikhalazo zokuthi baphiwe incwadi zesivumelwano ezizokwenza ukuthi bangene kwamanye ama-permit, incwadi zesivumelwano esingathi ngolwasemzini ngama-waivers. Yikho inkantolo yakuchoyo, yikho thina esikuchazisayo. Please like this video, circulate, subscribe. If you are on TikTok, please follow us. Otherwise, good.